Thank you very much for having me back again. This is such a great event, and it's an honor to be here sort of year after year, and up here. It's humbling to be up here in such good company. Let me start this. Let me go back. This is where we're starting. Before I start going through all my graphs here, I just want to say it was an incredible year in the multifamily sector, and I think I'm going to echo some of what we've heard from some of the other sectors in terms of the trends and the activity. So good, in fact, that I want to echo a little bit of what Matthew was just saying. It's almost like we're a little nervous. You know, I think maybe it's whether it's Maine or our conservative nature, but 2005 and then 2008 didn't seem like that long ago, and it's been such an uptick here over the last couple of years that we've been enjoying the ride, but are sort of cautiously optimistic. So I want to start out with a quick sort of where we are in the map from a time standpoint. Sales volume, looking back to 2005, in all sectors is up. We've got that nice U shape. The bottom was 2009, and the number of transactions followed a similar pattern. I distill out some of the numbers there because the graphs are hard to see, but basically all the regions were up and up substantially. South Portland was down, but don't worry about South Portland. That's just a very small market, and so those numbers can shift and doesn't mean anything. And we'll see that in another statistic. And Lewiston Auburn was up, and last year I said they were the one region that wasn't really participating in the resurgence in the market, and this year it seems like they're getting back in the game, which is really great to see. Median sales price reflects a similar pattern. Here it's interesting to note that it's really only Portland that has fully recovered the pricing from 2005, but the other areas are certainly doing well, and Saco and Biddeford area made a real nice jump this past year. Days on market, another good indication of health and activity in the market. We are really in a supply-demand crunch here, and we're going to keep, that's going to be a recurring theme. Portland and South Portland, again, I said don't worry about South Portland. Properties are staying on the market about 13 days, under 2 weeks. They're just fine. And Portland is similar, about 2 weeks. Westbrook and Saco Biddeford, a month and a half. That's a very normal market. And Lewiston Auburn at 71 days. That's a considerable improvement from past years. So let's dive into Saco Biddeford quickly. Sales volume was up 21%. That's up 145% from 2009. So that's just outstanding. The median price is up 27%. And their cap rates are about 9.5. And that's an interesting number because that was a Portland cap rate just a few years ago. So things are shifting. And price per unit, about $45,000 a unit. And those sales that I've got on the lower right corner, those are all the recorded sales in the MLS, 5 units and up. So just to give you a sample of the activity down there. Lewiston Auburn, sales volume up 44%, as I said. Transactions are up 24%. Median price is ticking up, which is great to see. And as far as I could calculate, the cap rate seemed to be about 15%. I'm sure there's quite a bit of variation depending on the product up there. And price per unit, $23,800. That's up just a little bit, and you can see a sample of the sales up in Lewiston Auburn. So I'm going to spend most of the rest of the time talking about the Portland market, so forgive me if we think back to that first slide about the sales volume, that top line was Portland, and the Portland market is 32% greater than all the other areas combined. So really the bulk of the transactions is here in Portland. Those first charts were also just comparing MLS data year over year and don't actually account for every sale. And one thing that was very notable in Portland was that there were a lot of major transactions, many more than in prior years, and some of those transactions were not even captured in that data. So things that were going on, a lot of large transactions, the most in recent history, and I'll get into some of those. Prices were up. And in some ways, the prices jumping helped facilitate the transactions because we could go, some of these buyers could go to these owners and really finally entice a sale. The price jump we saw this past year could finally get some of these owners to say, I like owning, this is my income, but if you can get me that price, I will sell. And And the market is strong, and the buyers are coming in with the opportunity to reposition these units. So we've got all these 100-year-old buildings in Portland that have been there a long time and run sort of the same way for a long time. But there is a bit of a changing demographic. And what's happening is we're getting people in from out of state, some young professionals. There seems to be some odd corridor between Portland and Brooklyn, New York. Are people aware of this? I've got a couple anecdotes. I've got a tenant who came up from Brooklyn. I got a text today while sitting at the table with a friend saying, hey, I've got my brother-in-law's coming up. He's just got a job here. He's moving from Brooklyn. Can you talk to him? So there's some, we're attractive to the rest of the world, but also we've got a nice connection to Brooklyn. Retiring baby boomers are coming from the burbs, empty nesters, and moving downtown. And young families are choosing to stay in Portland and not run off to the burbs in some cases. And I even personally was involved in a couple sales this past year that I had never done before, where there are young couples with infants buying properties in the city and not running off to the surrounding towns. One buying a nice brick house with no parking and a baby. And they came from Baltimore, and they said, that's okay, we don't have parking in Baltimore, we're living downtown, that's just what you do. And I think that's part of the shift that we're seeing go on in the Portland market. Another element of this market is that we finally have new construction in the works, and Vin mentioned that in his slide. He stole the thunder from one of my slides that I've got coming up, and that's going to affect things as we go forward. Munjoy Hill, I have to mention every year because it's the area, it's the hot area, but really the story this past year is that all of Portland was hot, and there were transactions happening all over the city. So looking at the commercial portion of the multifamily market, which is 5 units and up. These are really investor plays. As I mentioned, 3 large owners took the opportunity of this jump in prices to finally sell off some or all of their portfolios to these more aggressive buyers who want to come in and update these units and reposition them to take advantage of this new demographic that's coming into the city. A couple of these buyers, Port Properties, which is local, made a number of acquisitions, and a group called I-95, which is from out of state, also made some acquisitions. So the players are both local and from away. Cap rates in Portland have moved. 7% is really the number to have in your mind, although we saw some get below 7. And historically, I think for years I've been up here saying it's 9 all day. And over the last couple of years, we've really moved down to 7. And a couple of median stats, we're up to about $79,000 per unit, $103 a square foot. In these larger portfolios, as you'll see in a minute, the price was even higher than that. So some notable sales. These are not all of them, but a few worth mentioning. East End Corp., which had 74 units and I think 8 different buildings, was finally enticed to sell this year at a price of $94,000 a unit at a 7 cap. Joe Porta and Vince Ciampi from the Bulls Company brokered that sale. 50 units traded down on Grant Street. Those are those 3 buildings you can see in the upper right corner. At 85 a unit, that was about a 7.5 cap, and Chris Sullivan and I brokered that sale. Deering and High Street portfolio, another 37 units sold for $82,000 a unit. Seems to be under a 7 cap. That was Jay Sparrow and Vince Ciampi put that together. And then a portfolio out in Woodford's area, 5 buildings, 37 units for $86,000 a unit, about a 7.5 cap. In a normal year, maybe one portfolio like this would trade, and to have all these, and there were others, was pretty head-spinning. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the largest residential sale in Maine history that occurred this year. These complexes are out Tamerlane in Portland, Foxcroft in Scarborough, and Coach Lantern in Scarborough for a total of 309 units. A sale price of $50 million, per unit price of $162,500 a unit. That's a big number, folks. And a cap rate, I'm told, was about 6.5. Now, this is really a different kind of buyer. This is an out-of-state family trust, really looking to just sort of place assets here. This is different than what's going on downtown and driving prices downtown, but still reflective of the way wealth is moving around and the ways we're looked at from out of state. Joe Porta worked for 3 years putting that deal together. Great deal, Joe, and you are definitely buying drinks today. The 2 to 4 unit market, which is a little bit different. I think it's important that people understand this. 2 to 4 units are generally owner-occupants. Investors play in this space too, but these are buildings that are small. It's most of what is in this city are 2, 3, and 4 unit buildings. These are able to be residentially financed, so a first-time buyer can use FHA financing and buy a 2 or 3 unit building with only 3.5% down. So the pricing is totally different. If you're asking about cap rates on a 2 unit, you should step back, maybe do a little bit of homework. You probably, in most cases, should not be buying a 2 unit for its cap rate. It really is primarily looked at as a home with a supplementary income. So this market was incredibly strong, driven by a lot of buyers wanting to get into this space and very low inventory. So that drove prices up about 13% in the 2 and 3 units. Normally we'd carry about 50 to 80 units we would see online on the market at any one point. If you look on the MLS and multifamilies, you see 50 to 80 in past years. This year we were carrying about 20 to 25 units, buildings on the market. And it just seemed like everybody was looking for a multi. Every broker that I would talk to would say, hey, Brit, you know about any multis coming on? I got a buyer looking for a multi. I was like, yeah, everybody has a buyer looking for a multi. So I think that pressure is probably going to continue. I'm often asked, which side of town is hotter? Used to be the West End, right? But now it's Munjoy Hill. Is it Munjoy Hill now? I mean, everyone used to want to live on the West End, but now I think it's Munjoy Hill. Well, both sides were pretty incredible and had some staggering sales this year. So a 2 unit on the West End sold for $685. It was renovated, it was beautiful, but that's still a big number. A 4 unit I sold for $725, a 3 unit for $562. Those are all over on the West End. Those bottom 2 are nice buildings, but they weren't fancy. They weren't beautiful. They weren't new renovations. And over on the East End, 3 units for $716. That was listed for $699 and got multiple offers over asking price. 3 unit again for $699, multiple offers over asking price. And the 3 unit on the bottom sold for $655, and that was a rehab project. A year ago, I think my slide was that 3 units made a big jump on the hill, and they were all selling between $450 and $500. And this year, they were all selling between $650 and $750. So as a broker, it's hard to keep up. And it was sort of a humbling year in terms of figuring out what was going on, how to price things, and I started having to change my approach when we would look at a property and say, look, our job is to go find the price, because I don't know the price. I could not have predicted these prices a year ago. So what's going on for anyone who gets the paper? The Portland Press-Herald Maine today ran a long series on titled No Vacancy, looking at the rental market in Portland, and we got a lot of fun headlines. Housing crisis poses threat to economy. Pain and joy of development leaves, renovation leaves tenant homeless while couple builds dream condo on Munjoy Hill. Influx of affluence, a two-edged sword. Desperate renters look outside the city, and landlords capitalize on insane market. I'd actually said that insane quote at a landlord meeting I was hosting and forgot that somebody from the paper was at the meeting. On top of all this, Zillow came out with something that said that our rents were up 17.5%, the second highest in the nation. Now, the media covered this like crazy. I couldn't find one local report that actually linked to the study, and I couldn't find the study. I think the confusion is in some of the numbers we're hearing is that they're based on listed prices. They're going to Craigslist and looking at the average price on Craigslist, and even the Press-Herald did that, and the numbers that they were quoting were on listed amounts and weren't necessarily really reflective of what the actual market rents are, or average rent. So are we in a rental crisis in Portland? Last spring's market was certainly very hot, and a lot of the anecdotes we've all heard are true. Open houses, 10, 20 people showing up for showings, for rental showings, and prices going up. And this cuts both ways. The positive of that is these buyers, some of these buyers getting into the market, or folks like Port Properties in 995, are going in and they're really improving these buildings. This is not just rents going up and nothing changing. This is that the demographic is changing and demanding a better product. And so these tired 100-year-old buildings are finally getting improved, and it was long overdue. And I mentioned at a forum that I was at on housing recently that if the Press-Herald had done the story 10 or 20 years ago, the story would have been about the terrible state of the housing in Portland, and instead it's about the fact that we've got a changing demographic. But the positive is that we're finally catching up. These buildings are finally catching up. I think the real number is that the rents were probably up 8 to 9%, so it was certainly a strong market, but not 17%. Also, a dynamic that was going on last year and continues, that these high rents are forcing some people to consider purchasing. So it's actually going from the rental market and creating a stronger purchase market. Subsidized tenants are continuing to struggle to find rents downtown as this new demographic is coming into play. But I want to make sure before our government gets too involved or anyone freaks out too much, this winter has been really slow. And I keep hearing from landlords coming up to me saying, hey, where's the crisis? I ran an ad and no one's calling. Now, winters are always slow, so I'm really looking towards the spring to get a sense for where we're at. And finally, there are my rental numbers. That's looking at about 1,300 units averages. Because this is such a hot topic, I hope to get a more in-depth just rental report here in the next month or two. But I think these are pretty decent numbers, just real averages in the city. Again, I think at this point we could probably start to segregate the market into an A and B, maybe an A and B and C, because there are higher end units. There are one bedrooms out there for $1,800, $2,200, but that's not the average rent. It's really a different product. And we've never approached the city in that way, and it would be hard, but that may be something we can try and do in the future. So I found this interesting. I wanted to share this. I keep talking about this different demographic, and so a local management company had surveyed some of their tenants, and of 178 units that they looked at last spring, 27% of the tenants were from away. 26 of their renovated units they surveyed, and 65% were from out of state, 50% were two-person households, 23% were students, the average age was 29, and 77% of those tenants had an average household income of $58,000 or higher, and the average rent in those units was $1,170. This is important because that means the average rent was 24% or less of the household's gross income, whereas unaffordable is defined as being greater than 30%. So again, in the news, we're hearing a lot about the affordability gap, and that rents or that income is going down in Portland. And yet, I'm not sure that we can really have it both ways. Maybe we've got a demographic change, or maybe higher rents, and rents may be going up to meet this new demand. But it can also be the case that rents or that incomes are going down. So the Portland pipeline, Vin touched on a number of these, but I'm going to just add them up here because these rents are going up, but the market's starting to respond. And for the first time, we've got new housing, new market housing being created for apartments. The first was last year with West End Place coming online. That was 30 units, but now there's a whole bunch more coming. And we haven't had any new units in 30 years. So it's going to be interesting to see the effect these will have. We've got 33 units coming down on Bayside. They're in the ground there. 139 at Joe's Smoke Shop. Schlotterbeck and Foster's a project that developers are looking to put in 55 units there. J.B. Brown and Vin are doing the 63 units down on the El Rayo site. That's 310, and if Midtown happens, that's 710. There's about 17,000 apartments in the city, so adding another 700 to the inventory is about a 4% increase. That's not an insignificant number. So where are we in the cycle? And I think that's sort of the question that some of us are always feeling right now. It's been so strong. Is the city going through some fundamental change and it's just going to continue? Or are we just in an up and down cycle and we're at the peak and, we'll be lamenting here a few years from now because it'll just be on the downhill slope. So does the graph look more like this? Or is it a more normal cycle like this? I have no idea. I think there's arguments for both, and I think I'm just cautious that these new units coming online is going to at least put some pressure and not let the rents continue up and the prices continue up forever, that with new supply, it's going to put some sort of pressure back down on the market. So I have to have my obligatory slide on Westbrook. And I have to have this because there is so much going on in Portland, and rents are up and prices are up, and 5 miles down the road is this great town with a village on a river, and I've had some listings out there, and in some cases they can be almost hard to give away, and you see the prices that we've got in Portland. So I keep coming back to it year after year, and I think last year we started to see some signs that maybe it's starting to happen. Days on market is down dramatically. Sales volume was up almost 30%. Transactions were up 30%. And although the prices haven't moved, I think that new activity is exciting. And we can see a bunch of the new businesses going in there. And I think that's what's going to happen. We get a brewery in and a coffee shop or a bagel shop, and suddenly it's going to become a nice alternative. We don't all need to live on the peninsula. So my forecast is not particularly profound, because I think I've been trying to keep up with this last year, and I think we don't see any reason that things are going to change dramatically, although we're nervous that someone's going to turn off the spigot here. Brooklyn's a big place, and I think people are going to keep coming. The baby boomers are a big pool, and I think they're going to keep moving downtown. So I think we're going to still have some demand that's going to stand up for a while. So I think the sales are going to stay strong. I think cap rates will stay around 7%, and the high prices will hopefully continue to entice the sellers to sell. So we're making some good transitions here. But watch the rental market. At some point, what it's going to look like is we're going to get to a spring, and you're not going to get 10 calls, and the rents are going to be flat, and that's going to really dampen the buyer's interest, because right now the buyers are buying because they think they can improve the units, clean them up, and get higher rents, and that's really fueling the sales. And when that stops, everyone's going to sort of sober up here. Price of 2 to 4 units, I think will continue to go up some because the supply-demand imbalance, and rents. We just got to keep an eye on the market this year, and then 2 years from now, we've got to watch it as all these new units come online. Westbrook will emerge. No, really, this year. I say it every year, and I think last year was evidence that it started to happen. And I think Saco and Biddeford, they seem to be doing very well down there, and there's a lot of energy and activity and great development down there, and that's just excellent to see. So I think overall, it's going to just be another strong year. Hopefully, we can have the similar report next year. Thank you very much.